Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Wright, the President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of St. Vincent County, and we want to welcome you here to tonight's South Bend Mayoral Forum. Some important conversation this evening about the future of South Bend. We're very honored that you chose to join us this evening. Tonight, a couple of formalities, if we could, before we get started. Tonight's forum is hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Young Professionals Network here locally, also the WSBT stations and the South Bend Tribune. So we sure appreciate those four groups working together to make sure we brought you a quality program here this evening. Also wanted to give some specific thanks to a few sponsors who have helped put things together tonight. The law firm of Barnes & Thornburg is one of our sponsors who are here this evening. We appreciate their contributions. And also Martin's Supermarkets, our other sponsor that joined us this evening. So if you will, a big thank you to our two sponsors. Also, a special thank you to our friends over at Court Furniture who have helped us with our setup here this evening, and we couldn't have done it without them, so we appreciate their donation. I want to tell you real quickly before we get started about the process that the Chamber has gone through over the last month or so. What we're talking about here is, if you will, is a job interview, and each of you are having a chance here in the next month to pick the next CEO, if you will, of the city of South Bend, and we know this is a pretty important decision. So as part of our process, we started early with the application, if you will, and we asked each of the candidates to fill out a questionnaire to help us as a Chamber of Commerce get to know them a little bit better. Each one would probably tell you that it was the most difficult, complicated, longest questionnaire that they ever had a chance to fill out. Any agreement right here? But actually every one of them did a wonderful job. That was the first step of the process. And in order to be on the stage this evening, you had to go through that process, fill out that application, that questionnaire. And so that's why the candidates that you see out here this evening are the candidates who are with us. The next part of our process was we had brought in the candidates in for interviews. And we have a political endorsement committee that has sat with the candidates and interviewed and sort of grilled them a little bit more on their vision for South Bend and where they stand on a number of issues. And then we talk about tonight being sort of the final interview, if you will, in our process. So these guys have passed the first couple steps of the interview process. We brought them back this evening for their final interview. And we think we've got a good program and some good discussion. And you didn't come to hear me, so I'm going to stop with my remarks. I do want to very quickly just say thank you ultimately to my staff, Sherry Miller, our Director of Public Policy, Kara Grabowski, and our entire team who have put this together, as well as Tim Harmon and the team from the South Bend Tribune, John Hafferkamp, and the team from WSBT who have all worked on this. So thank you to each of you for putting this together. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our host for the evening. Many of you know him. You've watched him on TV from Channel 22, our host this evening, Dustin Grove. So Dustin, take it over. Thank you.
Before we begin, I just want to go over the format of how things will work tonight and how we came up with that format. For a while now, we've been compiling lists of questions to present to the candidates, topics of conversation, and those questions and topics have come from a variety of sources, including from you, the public. Several of these questions are directly from you emailed to us or Facebook to us, so I want to thank you for that. We do have 10 topics from a variety of sources. From that, we have 10 questions dealing with everything from jobs, the economy, to education, and crisis management, which I think will be pretty interesting. Look forward to hearing from you on that. You'll each get an opportunity, of course, to respond. It's important to point out that this is not a debate, obviously. We're in these wonderful chairs. There is no podium. We want to make this as much of a conversation as possible. So if there is a follow-up question to be asked, I'm going to ask that. There is no set opportunity for rebuttal because we want this to be about you, the candidate, and what you stand for and why you think you are best for the job. That said, while we do want to keep this as casual as possible, we want to keep the conversation going. And so for that reason, you'll each get 90 seconds to answer each question, and we'll also have someone in the front giving you a little idea when you're running out of time. So please don't be offended if I have to start to cut you off after 90 seconds in the interest of keeping things going. To those of you in the audience, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being interested in the process and obviously being committed to the community and its future. Thank you for that. I do ask that you hold your applause until the end of this evening's event to make sure that we give these guys as much time as possible to answer and talk about what they want to talk about. Let's see, gentlemen. Oh, one more thing. If you could reach in and make sure your phones are off. Sorry about that. Really appreciate it. Okay. Gentlemen, we will begin with introductory remarks. You will each have 1 minute for your opening statements. Ryan DeMora, let's begin with you.
Okay. Yes, everybody hear me? Okay. My name is Ryan DeMorak. I'm currently a state representative. I represent sort of the northern wedge of St. Joseph County, from the Michigan line down into downtown South Bend. My wife and I live in the North Shore Triangle, a couple of doors down from Pete, and we're raising our family in the city. I'm running for mayor for a number of reasons. Number one, I want my family to be able to grow up and make a life for themselves in the city. But number two, I've spent a number of years not only in the General Assembly, but also as an attorney working with businesses in our community. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to improve upon the groundwork we have in place and set some new policies in place to really make South Bend a strong city again.
Thank you. Barrett Berry.
Thank you. My name is Barrett Berry. I'm a native of this great city of South Bend. My family migrated here from Arkansas. My grandfather was a sharecropper in the 1940s, so worked in the factories here. And 6 generations of my family have lived in this great city, the Austin family. And we've been to live in every portion of this community. The reason why I run, I think I run because I see the faces of those who reflect my family, who have had some great opportunities, with those who have been left behind as well. And so what we plan to do is, we've been doing it regularly every week, laying out strong business growth and development, job development programs and initiatives to move this community forward collectively together. And so we're excited about the future of South Bend, the foundation that's been presented thus far, and we're looking forward to working diligently to move us collectively forward so we can have good jobs, good opportunities, strong education, sustained and safe communities, and a good place for seniors to end their final days, and we show and respect those who worked for us for many years before. And so my name is Barrett Berry. Working with you, I'll be the next mayor of this great city, the city of South Bend.
Thank you, sir. Mike Hammond.
Yes, I'm Mike Hammond. I am a county councilman, and I'm running for mayor because I want my kids to come back here and live in this great city. I think I have the resume to do the job. I was a county commissioner before, I was one of the mayors of the county. We oversee a budget of roughly $65 million, 1,100 employees, directly or indirectly. Also in that capacity, I was able to bring good jobs to this community. As part of the A.M. General 100 deal, I'd love to do the same, have the same opportunity for the city of South Bend. I've also been a teacher for 26 years, so I have a passion about that subject. 3 degrees from Notre Dame. In addition to that, I ran a small business, a marketing and communications firm here in South Bend for 8 years. Helping small businesses grow their businesses. Finally, I grew up in this town. I lived here all my life. I understand its people, I understand its needs. I think that's important to me. Thank you.
Pete Buttigieg.
My name is Pete Buttigieg. I was born right here in downtown South Bend. Spent most of my life in the North Shore Triangle neighborhood, less than a mile away from here at the Century Center. My career has mainly been in business. I'm a Rhodes Scholar, have a degree in economics, and I spent the better part of my career helping Fortune 500 companies turn around. I also served as a civilian economic advisor in Afghanistan. And for these reasons, I believe that I have the right kind of energy, education, and experience to deliver for South Bend. We need to deliver a new economic direction, strong schools, safe neighborhoods, and the kind of excellent city services that I think we all expect and deserve. And I hope I'll get hired for that based on my experience and my preparation. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion about exactly how to meet those goals.
Thank you, sir. And Wayne Curry.
I'm Wayne Curry, and I'm a Republican candidate for mayor of South Bend. I'll share a little about myself. My father brought my mother and I home from the hospital shortly after I was born to our first home, an 8 feet wide by 28 feet long mobile home. Thankfully, with opportunities and hard work, my family and I live in larger homes these days. That's what we need more of in South Bend, opportunities and hard work. I bought a 600 square foot burned house in 1993. Most who looked at it thought it'd be dead, not worth fixing. I rehabbed that house into my home, a 2-story blue and gold house located just south of Notre Dame. I have owned Wayne Curry Construction for 22 years, where I do home improvements and also home modifications for the elderly and disabled. I believe in our city and in making it better. I have worked with neighbors in many civic organizations since the mid-1990s. I served as chairman of the Economic Development Panel for the city plan from 2003 to 2006. Now I, Wayne Curry, am running for mayor of South Bend. I hope you will remember one thing about me. I am committed to making South Bend a better place to call home.
Thank you, sir. All right, our first question. How would you describe the city of South Bend? Pete, let's start with you.
First of all, I describe it as home. And then I would describe it as a city that is struggling to figure out what its identity is going to be going forward. I'm afraid that for a long time we've been waiting for some form or shape of Studebaker to come back. That we've always been looking to the past. The reality is that we may never again have a single employer putting more than 20,000 people to work. And the reality is it could be a generation before we have 132,000 people living again in this city as we did in 1960. My message is that we don't have to. We're also a city of great capability and capacity. We have a very talented workforce. We have some excellent firms, smaller firms, but if we have more of them, that will actually be more flexible and a stronger economic base than having a few of some of the biggest firms. And we're a town that I think has a number of colleges and universities here, 5 by my count, but hasn't quite figured out how to become a college town and how to have some of the economic and cultural benefits that college towns have. So I guess I would say we're a great little city. We have a lot more potential to become one of the most dynamic little middle American cities, and I hope we'll be able to meet that potential with some new vision and some new kinds of decisions.
Mr. Berry, how would you describe this? Do you agree that the days of a Studebaker type place are over?
I believe that's true. The city of South Bend is a city going through a transitional stage right now. Newsweek said we were a dying city. I do believe that we're in a transforming city. Like Pete said, the days of the big factories and 20,000 person employers are really gone right now. And so we're working to re-identify ourselves with the new growth, the new identity through new innovation park and mission park and the new technology that may come up. But we also recognize that we have an educational system that's suffering. And so we need to address those as well. So I would say City of South Bend right now is a city in transition. It's a city with a great economic future, with growth and development. A city that's moved from its past into the future. I think what has happened over the years is we misnamed ourselves by saying we were a city of manufacturing and factories, and actually the city was birthed from entrepreneurs and small businessmen who had great ideas, innovative ideas some 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. And they grew strong businesses, which then turned out to be great jobs for the middle class families. And so by going back to our roots of being entrepreneurs and small business owners and the like, recognizing there's only less than a handful of Fortune 500 companies in Indiana, and really grabbing hold of who we are. We're hardworking Americans, middle class Americans, with some strong small businesses, some good medium-sized businesses that can do more if we work collectively together. Look at a regional approach of growth. So City of South Bend, great state of status right now, and we're moving forward in a new identity in this next and new economy. And so that's where we are. A city ready to be catapulted into the future, to be the leader, not just North Central Indiana, but Indiana as a whole.
Mike, are we a city in transition?
Yeah, we're a city that's emerged into a new phase. And I think that, if people call it dying, I call it, we're in a state of transformation. And I agree that the old days of having huge corporations and big Studebakers, those are gone. It's been gone a long time, and that's just fine. It's a time now small businesses and entrepreneurs to allow us to allow them to unleash their potential. And, we have a very diverse city, too, and that's our strength. And we have some wonderful leaders in this community who are locked on to what we need. When I go down and I talk to them, I'm very encouraged what I hear from them in terms of where we need to go forward. And in fact, we had a forum here, I guess, yesterday, with some business leaders who are working to take the lead in terms of shaping the future. I think that's very good. And the people themselves are wonderful. The people themselves are wonderful. They have such heart and courage. South Benders are not quitters, they're fighters. So I feel good about the future.
Wayne?
Yeah, I think we're a city of opportunities. I mean, the greatest asset we have are the people of our community. We have many community groups that come together to solve a lot of the problems. We face a lot of challenges these days, and all over the city we have neighborhood groups that come together to solve these problems. Recently, I heard a group of businessmen convene to take on to try to find some solutions for the challenges that our city faces. And I commend men like that. I would like to see them as part of an advisory panel in my administration should I win. We have a beautiful river. The property around here is inexpensive. I mean, I think we actually do market our product in the right way. There's no reason why we shouldn't grow diversity at the same to get people to move back into our city.
All right. South Bend is,
It's my hometown. I think everybody from South Bend, even if they moved away, loves to come back. There's traditions here, there's community from neighborhood schools and football teams to the parades and all the aspects of our community life that just aren't the same everywhere else. But we're also a city with some problems. Some of those problems really were beyond our control. We had a national housing crisis that devastated neighborhoods in our city like it devastated cities across the region. We've had trade policy and other things really undercut our manufacturing base to cripple the entire industry here. But we have to address those weaknesses with our strengths. And in spite of all of those hard situations, we're still the center of a regional economy. South Bend has its own media market, its own strong universities and hospitals. It has great infrastructure from highways to rail lines to information backbones. And using the traditions and the community that we hold dear, along with the strengths that we have to move forward, we're going to be able to overcome those challenges.
Thank you. This really leads to our next question dealing with strategy. We all agree the Studebaker type companies aren't coming back. So what is your strategy for putting South Bend on a path of new ideas and innovation, and how would you put that plan specifically into place, specifically in the first 6 months or so of office? Let's begin with Barrett.
That's a great question, Ronnie. We will approach immediately changing the course how we do business in this great city. My first 2 hires will be 1 person, 2 assistants. I will have 1 who will be a public school liaison. The other person will be considered like a job czar, one who will focus on, part of the portfolio will focus on growing and establishing jobs. We laid out 4 job growth initiatives over the last couple of weeks. The first one is the Jobs Council. The Jobs Council looks at regional development by bringing together business leaders, community leaders together collectively, and we'll set it up so they will be reporting to you and coming up with creative ideas from using methodologies. We have outcome measurements so we can see growth and development through our regional approach to business development in the city. We get this process by mirroring what a lot of you people done with Barack Obama and the Chamber of Commerce, utilizing that approach to address the job growth needs. And also we announced Buy South Bend. We want us to have, we found in Grand Rapids they had a 10% growth in their employment by actually having, they changed local buying 10% to local buying, and they had a growth of 1,600 jobs and $53 million were added to their workforce budget. And so we believe by buying locally, we make changes there as well. And lastly, we announced today Hire One South Bend. Looking at a measure that Atlanta does, what they do is they hire we ask every 9,300 some employers in the great city of South Bend to hire just 1 person, St. Joseph County, hire just 1 neighbor for a job in the course of this year, which will have an 8% increase in employment in our city, in our region, actually, St. Joseph County.
Tell me more about this job czar position. This would be a position in your administration?
Yes. And the person will be my assistant, much as what you would see with Lincoln. They'll have the responsibility of working with the business community, rural and regional approach to creating jobs. And the Job Council as well as our Business Educational Roundtable, which we will start to initiate, and then we release it to be a separate nonprofit entity to work collaboratively with the city government, businesses, and the community, as well as some of those other educational partners and leaders, so that we can have really a collective approach to growing businesses, creating business investment in our communities, as well as the outcome of that job growth.
Okay. Mike, what would your strategy be?
The first thing I would do is make sure we don't do any harm. We don't put up any barriers to economic growth. That's why I strongly support, very public about my support on the chamber/project future tax abatement ordinance. If it passes in the city, I'd like to see it take to the county, quite honestly. I'd also like to review the rules and regulations, terms of how they inhibit the growth of businesses here, especially small businesses, and not just here locally, but downstate, so make it easier for folks to develop. I'd like to hire a small business advocate who can walk people, get people through the maze, the bureaucratic maze. It's very difficult for some folks. Look for incentives, economic incentives for businesses as they begin to grow and expand, offset with some of the training. I also think it wouldn't be a bad idea to poach some of those jobs in Illinois. You know, when I drive to Chicago, you see that billboard. Are you in Illinois with taxes? Yeah, let's go after some of those jobs. The mayor's a salesman. The mayor's a salesman in the city. Go out there and try to get those jobs. And the other thing I would do, I'd hire an economic development director who has had success in cities like South Bend to help put this whole thing together.
So you think the current rules do inhibit growth?
Yeah, I think every now and then you'll see, especially at the county level, I think the taxes we declare does inhibit growth. And I think that there are probably ways in which we can streamline things, either at the state level, at the city or county level, would make it easier for folks to expand. And it's very difficult. It's costly.
Wayne, what's your strategy?
I think South Bend has to learn to become more competitive as a city when we grow and attract people, businesses, and jobs back into our city. Whether it be perception or reality, that can be a discussion here, but we are viewed as a very business-friendly town. I believe in order to know what businesses want to move here, you need to ask business leaders what it is that brings them here. I mean, economics 101, if they can come here and make money, they'll come here and do business here. So what makes the success of the businesses that exist here, and how can we get advice from these gentlemen who actually are currently successful? And I would form a business advisory panel to my administration to give me advice on even hiring a top-notch economic development director, as well as the other thing is we have these cumbersome thick pages of ordinances. We send the wrong message. The first thing you want to do with a business is get them to sit down at the table and talk to me. Before I start telling you what you have to do to come to my city and build your business, let's not tell them that. Get them to come here, sit down and talk to us. If they come to our city, they look around, I think they'll like what they see here. And I think, you know, the real estate's cheap. We have a lot of potential. We've got, we're at the crossroads of our little region with the highways and networks. We've got an airport. So, I mean, if we just change our image and clean things up around here a little while, I think we could really go a long way with this.
Right, what do you think? What's the strategy for putting together a plan, a path for new ideas and innovation to bring jobs?
The first thing we're going to do is streamline the way we do economic development and job growth in the city. Over the last 30 years or so, we've had about a dozen different groups pop up to work on economic development issues in different sectors of the city. There's a lot of good people in those groups, and they do a lot of work, but they need to be more coordinated. And I think there needs to be some accountability from the political leadership to take credit for when things go well and take the blame when things don't go so well. We're going to use that real organized effort to focus a lot more on helping businesses in the city of South Bend. We're always going to try to make the climate a great place for new companies to move to. But I don't want to be too pie in the sky focused on landing a Fortune 500 company in South Bend in a couple of years. That's probably not going to happen. Where we have a great opportunity for growth is with all of our great businesses who've been employing people in the city for 20 and 30 years. If we've got every business in the city of South Bend to help them hire one more person, that would be far more jobs in the city than we lost with the closing of AJ Ranch. So we're going to focus a lot more on helping our businesses find ways for them to expand and grow their own business here in the city.
Certainly one of the things that I saw working in the business community is that a strategy has to be comprehensive and it has to guide everything that we do. I think our economic development strategy has to have three elements. First, it has to focus on the competitiveness of the businesses that we have here. Secondly, it has to have room for creating new homegrown businesses because the surest sign that an employer will be here is whether they began here. And then third, we have to pay attention to the need to attract outside investment. Now, the first of those, we actually have a lot of extraordinary companies here. And I did not mean to say that we're done with all forms of manufacturing. Every chance I get, several times a week, I'm walking the shop floor of some company in South Bend, often in the city limits, that is putting people to work. And you would not not believe how many of them are actually exporting goods made right here in town to Asia. These are the kinds of companies that have a chance to succeed. And they're companies that tend to compete not on price alone, but also on quality. They have intellectual property in their products, or they have some kind of distinctiveness that means that they have to produce here in the U.S. When it comes to growing new businesses, that's the part I think we're strongest on already with things like Innovation Park. But we can't count on that to provide large numbers of jobs, especially for non-college graduates, especially in the next 10 to 15 years. And then with attraction, we can't think of attraction as just bringing a headquarters of a Fortune 500 company here. That's a mistake if we think that we can do a lot of that. But we can attract investment here based on our excellent logistical and infrastructure abilities.
Thank you. On to the next question, which deals with staff. Tell us how you will build your team, your support team, and give us some specific examples of experiences building a team in another organization. Feel free to name names if you'd like of people that you would bring on as your support staff. Mike?
Yeah, what I look for in people, and this is the two basic qualities, and that is competence and integrity. I should add to that accountability. And in my experience as a county commissioner, I did have that opportunity to hire and fire certain folks and develop those qualities I was looking for. So there are a lot of wonderfully talented people in this community. We've been touching on the business community. A lot of great leaders in the business community, I think, that could play a role. They would play a role in my administration. A lot of folks that have a deep understanding of the education system that might want to play a role. So those are the three things I think that demand integrity, competence, and accountability, and make sure they do their job and they're responsible.
Wayne?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying, I don't want to be the Democrat mayor, and I don't want to be the Republican mayor. I want to be everyone's mayor. And I think you have to start the administration. If we want to fix this city, we actually have to look beyond political partisanship and hire the best people we can find for the job, regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats. We have Republican businesses, we have Democrat businesses, and it's in our best interest for all of them to survive and for all people in our community to do well. So first, I think you put partisan politics aside and you look for the best people you can find to do the job. Secondly, I think as far as the economic development director goes, I think we really need to go outside our community to some city larger than like Chicago or Indianapolis. Find someone that's second in command that can bring with them the expertise that they've learned in a larger city and dealt with some of the problems we've dealt with, and bring them in here. And of course, that's going to cost a little more money than probably what the mayor makes, but I think we can make up for that by laying off some of the people in that department because it's a little oversized in the first place. Other than that, I want integrity. I want people to be fair. I won't put up with anybody that's, I'm going to say, leaning on people just because they don't agree with them.
So you're saying bring someone in from the outside and reduce the size of
They say that it would cost maybe $100,000, $120,000, $130,000 to get this economic development director. I'm just a guess throwing it out there. I don't know what it would be. If that would happen, that guy makes more than the mayor. I have no problem with that making more than the mayor. What happens is if we got to get rid of one of the staff, what I've heard is there's too many people from the business community that you go and have something done, and then this guy at the bottom of the economic development department comes in, and they'll say, well, you have to do A, B, C. You do A, B, C, and then he takes it back to his boss, and then that guy says, well, you got to do D. And then he has to go do the, so there's too many underlings in between the business owner and the top guy. So they really need to start dealing with the top guy, have a set rule of guidelines that they don't follow, and then you have to reduce the time a business has to put in to actually, they have to go to be able to expand their business.
Brian is the answer looking outside.
I think that there's probably some people who can bring in from the outside. I think there's actually a number of employees we have that work for the city that do a great job. In my job as a legislator, I work with a number of people from the city who seem to be tireless advocates and are well respected in the community. I think the foremost important truth that we need is enthusiasm. I do not want to have an administration where we have complacent employees. And you ask the names, like the city employs 1,100 people. I told everybody I'm not talking about job hiring with anybody until we get elected, so we can wait till then. But we're not going to promise jobs or anything like that to anybody now. But we're going to lay out the criteria where we want somebody who's qualified for the job, has a track record of success, and is enthusiastic about moving South Bend forward. I think those are the criteria for an impacted employee and for the citizens of South Bend.
Do you think the staff is too heavy in certain places? Do you think it could be streamlined?
Well, the first order of business we're going to do providing customer service they're supposed to and delivering the service that needs to the customers. I think we need to have a process like that in place for South Bend to make sure our departments are actually doing the jobs that citizens want them to do. And that's going to be one of the first processes we put in place as we hire employees.
Pete, what about that? You think there needs to be an audit done? Take a look at everything from the top down?
You know, sometimes it is important to take something apart and put that together on paper to see if things still make sense. We came close to doing that in an exercise called budgeting for outcomes, which the city did in 2008 when we thought we were staring down the barrel of a major cut to funding. The passage of the local option income tax fund was changing the reality, and so that exercise was never completed. But we do need to reimagine our budget in the bottom line. One of the things I did for a living was just that. So I remember one client organization that was a large insurance firm that had grown in such a way that there was a great deal of duplication, and some people didn't even know what the people working for them were doing. I don't know that that's the case in the city, but we do need to look hard to find out. More broadly, I won't be naming any names because in order to protect the integrity of this campaign, I've made sure that there won't be any arrangements or any promises to hire or to fire anybody. But I can tell you what I'm looking for. More than anything else, I'm looking for energy and talent. You know, your team needs to be balanced between people who have a lot of experience and expertise in the specific things you're working on, and people who have the capacity to absorb. And you can see that in the way I put together my campaign team. You know, one senior member of my staff who didn't have any campaign experience, but had the right kind of talents to do the job, and was doing a terrific job. And that's one of the principles we follow in my firm. Sometimes we hire astrophysicists to work on business problems because we knew that if they had the energy, enthusiasm, and intellect, we could train them on the specifics.
Barry, how would you build your team?
I have two experiences of transitioning staff. One, I was a White House appointee. I worked the very last hour of the day before it was pushed to the swearing in of office. And so I experienced that transition. It's heartfelt. And also when I was on transition staff for Governor Patrick, we went in and my responsibility was to identify cabinet heads for him. And so we would narrow down those selections to those final three. We searched the state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as the nation for the best qualified candidates to serve in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the new governor, Governor Patrick. So we did that same approach. We also recognized him being a Democrat going into a Republican, coming out of a Republican administration, that we had many people who were diligently for him and had the same views and visions that he had as a Democrat. And so we did a surgical approach. So in my administration, what we would do is everyone would reapply for their positions who are appointed by the mayor, so we can find the best talent. We do believe there's some good people doing some great work, great energy, and great skills, and well-educated right now in the city. But also there may be a time for transition out, so we can bring in fresh new ideas, new energy, and new loyalties. And so that's how we would approach building our staff. As I mentioned earlier, we would look at those things that are most important to the community, such as education, strong public education, creating a partnership between the city government and public schools, so we have someone who will be a lead on public education, as well as a job jar, which I mentioned earlier, which would be the other person to whom we would hire. And those would be the first two hires initially, plus a strong chief of staff as we move forward into a new day in this great city.
Okay, so we talked about our support staff. Let's talk about the budget. This city is a $150 million a year plus organization. Heck of a bank ledger there. Give us some examples of your individual experiences dealing with complex financial matters. What qualifies you to handle a city of this size and the finances involved? Wayne Curry, let's begin with you.
Well, I'd say to start with, the mayor doesn't really write the checks or balance the books. You surround yourself by qualified people to start with, so you hire the best and the brightest that could guide you forward. Secondly, when it comes to, I would say, budget shortfalls and things like this, I think we need to get a handle on TIF districts. I think we have two ways in which you can actually generate revenue for the city. One is to raise taxes, the other is through growth. If all your growth comes through these TIF districts, where that money is locked in and being only spent in that district, then you have no other choice but to raise taxes. So in shrinking the size of the TIF districts or getting away from having them so big, you can shore up the general fund without going to the county and asking for continued option taxes.
Tell me about your experience, though. I mean, what qualifies you to, because you're right, you do surround yourself with support staff and people who know those things, but the buck stops with you.
Yeah, of course. I'm just saying, I've ran a business for 22 years, nothing like what you're talking about, $150 million, so I've never ran that kind of a budget. But there again, you hire your best and your brightest people to do that.
Right?
When dealing with the large budget right now down in the General Assembly. The state of Indiana has a multi-million-dollar budget. And I've been proud of the fact that every 2 years since I've been in office, we've been able to deliver a balanced budget. Indiana is a state that, unlike a lot of its neighbors in these tough times, is a state in black. We've been able to do that in a bipartisan way. I've always said that dollars and cents don't have any partisanship. They don't lie. And you will only have what you're able to work with at the end of the day. So the budget is going to be important, and I've got some experience doing that. I think the other advantage is I've spent a number of years actually helping draft the laws that dictate how local government finance works. It's a complicated process, everything from tax collection, how you spend your money, how you report it to the state, and it's difficult and I've got a good grasp of it.
Pete, what makes you most qualified?
Well, certainly in the business world, I was dealing with large budgets all the time, often multi-billion-dollar budgets in the private sector. I've learned a handful of things about budgeting. One of them is that to understand budgets, you have to understand bureaucracy. One of the things, again, that we have to do is take our budget apart in what we would in the business world call a clean sheet process, and then see if it actually makes sense. Because so often, the way that we handle budgets is we just look at last year, and tweak it up and down a little bit, and then we go forward. It's been a long time since we've gone back to first principles in our budget to see if everything is still aligned with the priorities of the state. Probably the most bureaucratic institution I've ever been exposed to is the military, where I served as a reservist. I would argue that that experience also comes in handy. But mainly it's my time in the private sector, where we often had to make tough decisions on extraordinarily big budgets. Squaring that with some of my experience in the campaign world, where we have tiny shoestring budgets where every penny counts, I think will be a useful background in going into the city.
Eric, what makes you qualified? You can give us an example of a situation you face.
I'll give about 3 different examples. First, most recently here in the city of South Bend, I made some very difficult decisions, some nonprofit organizations where I served as president of the board. One would be the United Religious Community in St. Joseph County. We are an advocacy organization that have over 100 different congregations. And we had a difficult task of identifying how do we maintain an advocacy center, which does a lot of great work in the community. And so we had to make a decision collectively as a board as to release someone from their position, because it really strained our budget and being able to provide the services that many people in South Bend require. And so being having the courage to make those decisions and looking at the red and making it black, we've been successful thus far. Secondly, I've also served in another board capacity for a school here in town. We had to also make a tough decision, which required us to really look at what's in the red and move it to the black, and also make some changes in our employment as well.
Where was that?
That's the Veritas Academy. So those two are just immediate examples here in the city, but also special assistant to the Secretary of Labor, Alexis Herman. In that capacity, we had a budget for the International Labor Affairs Bureau, and it was a multi-million-dollar budget. It required us, we had over 75 employees, and did work throughout the country, work throughout the world actually, and we had to really work within the means that we had, which really called for us to do a fine-tooth comb review of our expenses, our ebb and flow of our finances to maximize what we have accomplished for our technical assistance programs around the world, as well as bringing labor rights and child labor laws to the trade agreements between the United States and those who we do business with. And so that's how we approach what I've done in the past and moving budgets forward. Thank you.
And Mike, your experience?
Well, actually, I have quite a bit of experience as a county official, as a county commissioner for 4 years, as I mentioned before, and I've gone through 2 budget cycles as council, so that's 6 budget cycles. And I've gone through budgets, and money's been flush, and also when it's been very lean. These are some very different times. So I've worked with county officials like Prosecutor Mike Moore up there, Commissioner Dick Thomas, and Raphael Morton up there, as we made very difficult choices. We've done it in a very collaborative way. I would like to continue to do that as mayor. I'd like to work with the council and trying to set forward some priorities. And I like this whole idea of the outcome-based types of projections there. I like what Gary Lott's been doing in public works. I think it's really, really good, and the keys all to do with that. And so I've quite a bit of experience doing this. It's basically where the sausage is made, and a lot of that.
As mayor, you will hear from all sorts of people on all different sides with all different perspectives. How do you get those people to work together who clearly don't agree on the issues? How do you get them to buy in to the vision that you're casting for the city, right?
Number one, I think it's important to realize that you're never going to get everybody to buy in. That's one of the first and hardest lessons of politics, is that not everybody's going to buy into your plan. But I think it is important to build consensus. And the root of that is having healthy relationships with all different sectors of our community. We need to make the business community feel like they're part of the process. We need to make the educators in that community feel like they're part of the process. And the neighborhood groups that feel like they've been left out of the process.
What does that look like?
It involves, number one, transparency. So everyone knows how the process works and how it goes on from day to day. And on top of that, number two is communication. Not just necessarily making yourself available, but actively going out and talking to people. Making the time to go knock on doors in the neighborhoods. Taking time to go out and visit businesses. That's important. People recognize it. It's critical to making the process work.
Keith, for building consensus, transparency, communication, agree with that? Add to it?
Well, you have to meet people where they are. If I'm heading toward a decision, and if I'm right, I should be able to explain to anybody why it's the right thing to do. And again, that's something that's come up very often in my experience. I did it one time when I was doing economic stability operations in Afghanistan. I thought a spectator in a room full of people at a briefing of soldiers who'd been assigned to take us to some industrial sites that we wanted to look at. And just as I was settling into my seat, the colonel tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I understand why you three civilians are here, but my men don't understand why they're supposed to go outside the wire and guard you and go into harm's way to take you to see these things you're supposed to see. So I look forward to you explaining to them why they should be doing that." And that'll be in about 2 minutes. And, what I had to do was stand in front of a room of mostly 20-year-olds who did not come into the military in order to do economic development, and explain to them the relationship between our mission of economic stabilization and their mission of securing the country that they were in. And again, if you're right, you can do that. I've had to do that time and time again in the business community, because I come out of the consulting world, and you're never hired to ratify a status quo. You're hired to build consensus and make a case for change. Eric?
Two different examples. When I was in graduate school, most recently at Harvard Kennedy School, I had the pleasure of going to school with the president's daughter, President Obama's daughter, and also I was a fellow there at the Center for Public Leadership. And we had 10 Israelis as well, government officials who were also went to school with us. And I took the opportunity to bring the two parties together, which was a very touchy situation because it had global implications, because we had the president's daughter with 10 Israelis, and we had a conversation really about the very differences when we come to one place, neutral ground, and we found we had commonalities. We wanted to have good families. We wanted to have good education for our kids. And so that was an example of how we can work collectively together in the world stage, but in a very local unit there in Cambridge. As recently as President of the United Religious Community, we had a dinner where we brought together the two imams and the two rabbis here in the community, and a Lutheran pastor and myself. And we sat there for the very first time in the history of St. Joseph County and had a conversation dinner, and just really talked about our differences, but also the things that we shared in common. And so those are global implications right here in our local community. But by bringing us together, remaining transparent, as Ryan stated before, we were able to really find a common ground on how we can move this community forward collectively. Those are just two examples. I can go on and on about it for a second. And lastly, I'll share this. I think this in our community as a whole, we haven't had the dialogue and discussion that we need to have in every segment of South Bend. And so some people feel their voices have not been heard. And it's been real, it's been relevant when we go around and knock on doors and have these town hall meetings and the like. And so we want to bring the whole city together, have a conversation about our differences, but also those things that really bind us together as a collective unit in this great city. So that's how we will approach bringing people together.
And really quickly, how do you do that? What does it look like? How do you make everyone feel included?
You have to have a create a safe space, meaning that those will have to feel as though they don't have to be worried about being attacked or feel at ease. And then make the ground rules of we'll be transparent, we'll be honest, and we'll be fair. And once you do that, you bring a sense of comfort, and you can have those tough discussions. I mean, it was amazing to see President Abbas's daughter go and stand up against 10 Israeli government officials and not bend and stand her ground in their presence. But it's because everyone felt safe and comfortable with the discussion. And so it made parity, equality, and justice for them.
Okay, thanks. Mike, how do you bridge the gap?
Well, I think trust. And I think I have time to do this, but there are three things I'm really proud of in the public serving with that county commissioner. One was working really well with my two fellow commissioners, City Board and Bev Crone. There's a little bit of distrust there, and I just wanted to I said, look, I'm going to give you a year. You're going to learn who I am. I'm a person of upstanding quality. I'm out here to subvert what you're doing. And then we're going to work together to have the county commissioner's office just work very smoothly so we'll be open for business and folks can deal with the county. And it was so successful. Eventually, the South Bend Tribune wrote an article that praised the county government. Said, good Lord, good government. It was kind of amazing. The last time we praised some county government. But I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the fact of the role that I played in the AM General Homer deal, working with Jeff Lake, who's Economic Development Director of Mishawaka, Bob Buter, Mayor of Mishawaka, Cindy Bowler, by Corner, and I had to stand in front of 3,000 people at Penn High School and tell them, good news, AM General's coming, it's going to be thousands of jobs. Difficulty is 51 of you are going to have to move in 3 months to make good for this plan. And we had to work hard with those people who do not trust government. Say, you can trust us. We're going to take care of you. And we did everything we could to make that transition work. And it was it's one of the things I'm most proud of.
Wayne, what about you?
Just to add to many of the great ideas I've heard here mentioned already, I just quote a great past leader we had. Imagine all the good we can do if we don't worry about who takes the credit for it. I would say that, added to all the advice we did, I think that the mayor doesn't need to worry about taking credit for all the development projects in the city. I think the way you get a consensus amongst the council is actually to pull each council representative from each district when you have something going on, have maybe monthly meetings or weekly, whatever it takes. If there's a project going on, allow them to talk to their people and to actually delegate some workings with them to actually communicate with with the people on whatever project you're working on. Also, I think there's a little bit of each group of people have their own expertise. When it's matters of business and concerning the business community, obviously those folks have more weight in the decision-making process. When it matters of the neighborhood and the community, you're looking at the people in the neighborhood communities, they're going to have a little more weight in those decisions. So I mean, there's a balance, but some people know more about some things than others, and you've got to go with that.
Okay. This next question, you each will get a different scenario. As mayor, unfortunately, emergencies happen, crises happen. And we want to know how you can think on your feet to administer and lead in a crisis. Each of you will get a different question to answer in your allotted 90 seconds. We begin with Pete Buttigieg. If South Bend were to experience a natural disaster, such as an F5 tornado, that had a path of destruction that stretched from Portage Avenue on the northwest side, Irish Hills apartment complex on the southeast side, and included a large portion of downtown. Can you hear something? What would be your immediate response, and what would be your long-term timeline for rebuilding the city from the world's largest tornado?
The immediate response has to do with communication. We need to make sure what kind of communication was available. And if the natural disaster could compromise cellular networks or other forms of communication that emergency responders rely on, we would need to figure out an alternate system. In terms of the long-term reaction, what you would need to do, I suppose, would be to figure out what you need in order to keep us as a functioning city. And those are the kinds of things that need to be reconstituted, first of all, on a one-week timeline, right, to be able to take back basic life support functions from whatever federal actors are on the ground to provide the basic emergency services. And then on to sort of year-long timeline where you're trying to get everybody back into school, trying to get our businesses up and running again. And then the 5 to 10 year path where you're trying to decide which parts of the economy, which parts of your physical footprint ought to be put together the way they were, and which ones there might be an opportunity, however unfortunate its genesis, to reimagine the city. One of the reasons that Chicago is as well designed as it is that it was obliterated by a horrible fire. And so what we would need to do is ensure that we were imagining not just what the city used to look like, but what the city ought to look like. It's funny because in a way, we had an economic F5 tornado come through here. Maybe that's the kind of mentality we need to take on that as well.
Thank you. Barrett Berry, can you imagine what's coming? This is a very serious situation, all kidding aside. One of the unfortunate occurrences in cities is the unexpected loss of a police officer. And unfortunately, we've seen way too much of that for any community to bear in the last 6 or 7 years. If the South Bend Police Department and a portion of the community were to have a standoff and it resulted in an officer being shot and killed, how would you work to heal the community as a whole and repair the relationships between police and that particular segment of the community and create a sense of peace and security?
My first job in the federal government, I had the fortunate opportunity to work with the State Department and oversee citizen services. And my day-to-day job was to negotiate the return of permanently kidnapped children abroad. So if you've seen the movie Not Without My Child, that's what my job was to do every day, was to negotiate something very sensitive, something very emotional, something very passionate, nothing like losing your child. In that class, I had to make 2 death calls to parents who lost their children abroad who died, and I had to be the one to share that information to. And so I can feel the energy and the passion and the pain and the emotions that one goes through when you lose a loved one, especially in the time of a police officer and such. My last assignment with the State Department was to be the control officer for the Al-Qaeda bombing of the 2 embassies in Tanzania and in Kenya. In that capacity, we lost someone from South Bend, one of 11 Americans who were killed. And my mentor and his son were actually killed in that bombing. Actually, it was in the middle of an email campaign and discontinued. And so then I had to represent our nation globally and bring back returns and to inform the daughter how she found out. I get emotional about this. She didn't believe her dad had died. And so how we had to tell her this was the fact that we knew it was him because we found his fraternity ring on his left arm, on his left hand. And so I had to break that news to her and deal with that from a family situation. So I know at the highest level of government what it means to lose a loved one and then be exposed to it. And so how we approach that, we approach it with love, tender care, and really bring a sense of mending and healing in the community that you would do holistically as well as individually for that one particular family.
Mike Hammond, as you are well aware, and we're all well aware from the snowstorm that we got in January, we get a lot of snow around here. If South Bend were to receive a large snowfall of, say, 36 inches in 24 hours, I think what did we get, 33 inches in January? We were close to that. Well, you know what, let's up it to 50. 50 inches in 24 hours. What would be your plan of action to prepare the city and communicate with the public your actions when the storm hit? And what's your target time to get everything back open and on schedule?
Well, I've had a lot of experience doing this, at the county level as a county commissioner. When I took office in '99, we had a huge snowstorm like this, and it was really, really difficult. And the first thing that you want to make sure is, are your crews operating at maximum efficiency? Ours were. I firmly believe that the city of South Bend, contrary to what people think or feel, and it's not going to like this, we were operating at max efficiency. Understand how it works. And when people were upset, they were working as hard as they could. And I think that, so that's the number one, all the pieces in place there. Next thing you got to do is you got to communicate to people, their expectations. And you have to be ready to deal with the people being upset and let them vent and say, here's our plan, here's what we're doing, we want to clear these roads out here, here's why. Please be patient, please work together, please take care of one another. That's very important. You want to don't do anything stupid. This is why we declare emergencies, snow emergencies, so that people don't go out on the roads and get stuck, so that first responders can get to someone if there's need an ambulance. So I think you have to be out there communicating that. I think our mayor's done a wonderful job in that, quite frankly, just from my perspective as a former county official.
You talked about updating people and telling them where things stand and how things stand. What does that look like? Are those everyday updates or those?
I'm there with Dustin Grove, right on the news. I'm saying, the new Luke Choate. I'm with you and I'm saying, here's what's going on. Please be patient. We're doing the best that we can. When this tornado hit, I was the tornado guy in 2001. I was on the morning news telling people, stay off the roads, don't worry, don't go to work today. Take a day off. You had to be out there doing that. So it's important.
Okay. Wayne, You were successful in your election as mayor. You are on the job for 18 days when you learn that one of the largest employers in South Bend has decided to close its doors in 1 month, and it'll mean 800 jobs leaving. This information has not been shared with the employees or the public yet. What would you do to work with that business in a last-ditch effort to keep them in South Bend? Specifically, what would you do?
To start with, you have to find out why they're leaving in the first place. I mean, what are their problems? And without knowing those, there's not much you could actually do other than bring them to the table and see what kind of incentives, what things you could do to get them to stay. Yeah, and when it comes to actually weighing how much you give them versus the job loss, I mean, you can't give away the candy store, but you do as much as you possibly can to keep them here. I mean, it's going to come down to a matter of money, I'm sure, is what the thing's going to be, and how far can we go and keeping them there.
What would you do if you realized they had no intention? What would you do for the 800 people who will be out of a job in a month as mayor?
Well, they would be getting unemployment. The other thing we'd have to do is check in to see, hopefully they'd be getting unemployment. The other thing to check and see, make sure whatever types of jobs that they were losing, are there other jobs available around here that you could actually move them into? Are there other types of training that we could move them into to get them trained so that they could actually be better equipped to go out and find more work?
Ryan, last week in Martinsville, we saw the horrific story of Chance Jackson, a 15-year-old middle school student who was shot in the abdomen twice by another student just before school started. While the school corporation here in South Bend, of course, has its own crisis management plan, if a shooting were to occur, how would you as the mayor help to reassure the safety of schools in South Bend for students, parents, and the whole community?
I think we had a reminder of that today as we were getting ready to take the stage. There was a shooting near Riley High School that shut down the high school for the safety
for a while.
And those are the tough realities of life. The mayor's role, I think, is twofold, well, threefold. First of all, we have to make sure safety, everyone's health and life safety is adequately taken care of. That involves securing the situation, making sure you have coordinates in place and no one's life is imminently at risk. After that, making sure that you have security and a stable environment to treat everybody that needs to be treated. But at the root of all of this is making sure you have proper planning in place. And that includes all types of disaster preparedness. I don't know if you can plan for the giant F5 tornado to wipe out the whole city, but you can have procedures and policies in place that have the hierarchy of needs going first, making sure whoever's life is at risk is attended to. Food and shelter come after that. And then we make sure orderly operations of the city are steadily reinstated. And those same policies and procedures can be applied to any type of crisis scenario, whether it's a school shooting or a tornado or even a factory closing.
So you believe there should be a plan in place in addition to the school crisis policy if something were to happen in the school?
Well, I think there is a plan in place with the police department already on that. I mean, the shooting didn't happen, from my understanding, at the school. It was nearby. But out of concern for the safety of the students.
You're talking about today, right?
Today.
Okay.
In any situation like that, today we had this situation, it was a shooting at a school. And one of the first reactions was lock the school down and make sure the students are safe. Secure the scene and make sure that nobody ever loose is going to cause any more damage. And those are all parts of policies and plans that are in place and that are practiced regularly.
Okay. Question number 7 deals with economic development. We've touched a little on this, but let's delve a little deeper into the topic. Both the Chamber and WSBT, as I mentioned a little while ago, asked for questions that they were interested in you answering. And by far, I'm sure you know that jobs was the number one topic. By far, most people wanted to know about jobs. What will you do in South Bend to attract new businesses to our community, creating new jobs? And specifically, what type of incentives would you offer to get there? Let's begin with Pete.
I mentioned earlier the overall strategy, just to make sure our existing companies are competitive, make sure we're growing new homegrown companies, and make sure we're attractive for outside investment. When it comes to how a city makes itself attractive, there's a sort of a short-term or micro play, and then there's the bigger picture. The short-term play has to do with incentives, tax abatements, and that sort of thing. If we find that we are in the running, maybe in the top 2 for an investment opportunity, and we're a little bit behind on the cost of land, waivers, utilities, taxes, raw materials, and we see that it's worth it to us to get that company there, then it might be worth it to buy down the difference with the tax abatement, and that's the role that they play. But I'm afraid that our economic development conversations as a community have been sidetracked by paying attention only to tax abatements at the expense of the bigger picture. The reality is that a community has to have a convincing overall business atmosphere and environment if it's going to attract and retain top businesses. If decision makers at a company, the kinds of decision makers I used to work with, if they look at a community and they don't feel absolutely confident that the infrastructure is up to snuff, that the educational system has provided them with a flexible workforce that can allow them to grow, or that there's a go-to person in the government when they need something, you can't pay them to make what they think of as a bad business decision.
So you're saying lay the groundwork?
Exactly.
Get that in the beginning, because obviously a lot of those things don't happen overnight.
Yeah, but that's got to be the ultimate strategic goal. We can do what we can in the short run with tax abatements and other kinds of incentives, but we've got to look at the overall atmosphere in order to truly be competitive.
Derek, what do you think?
Excellent question. When I was in Washington Lincoln Troop, after living in the White House, I worked for a firm where our job was to grow and bring in business and economic development in cities and towns. Some of our clients were Baltimore, Philadelphia, Prince George's County, Anne Arundel County, and Maryland. And so every day we were really paint a picture for how a city looks outside of itself, so that businesses will want to invest in that community. How you do that is you bring, you look at the different ways to find federal funding for water, sewer, transportation, and the like. You would let them know. We asked people in South Bend if we had a convention and visitors bureau. The majority of them would say they don't know we even have one. So we would open up the place to do better marketing for the people not only in our city to speak for the ambassadors of our community, but also the businesses themselves. And I mentioned before, we look at bringing together the 8 economic development entities or so. Depending on when you talk to Jeff, Jeff told me there are 8, and I outlined 8. We were working, what Ryan said earlier, we were working the collective measure of how we approach working collectively together instead of separately, and having a plan of addressing that particular issue about job growth and development. When we set an atmosphere so people outside of our community know that we're here to do business, we streamline how easy, make it easier for entrepreneurs to start businesses. We talked to a gentleman today on Lincoln Way who said that the subway there on Lincoln Way struggled for 3 months to get started because they had difficulty getting the permits to open up business. So they had to pay rent for 3 months and cost $250,000 to open up a subway chain store. And so we want that not to be the norm. We want people to know that here in South Bend, we're about growing jobs by doing good business practices, streamlining the federal and the state government, and the city municipal government, and then create an atmosphere for folks to grow businesses and create jobs. That's how we approach something we've already proven around this nation with the Washington Institute.
Mike, does the process need to be streamlined?
Yeah, I think the process does need to be streamlined somewhat. I'd like to look at the ways in which we can do that. And I made reference to trying to do that, and I think that would have an immediate impact. I also think that I mentioned incentives for businesses, and one of the things that I've been talking to businessmen about, and again, we're looking at small business growth, we're attracting small businesses too. One of the things that they would like to have help offsetting is training costs. And we've run a plan, and it's a lot of the folks that I talk to like it, where let's say you have a small business of 8 or 9 employees, you're an architecture firm or an engineering firm, you want to expand to 5 employees. Well, maybe the city can help out with your training costs, maybe $10,000 per employee, four installments for the first year, to help offset that sort of thing. Or if they're working team to go to somewhere like try to get more training, that we can help with that. It could be a 1-year certificate program. And I do not want to I don't want to overstate. I don't understate that it's very important to point out tax statements are important. When you talk to folks, whose job it was to bring jobs here. We were talking to the Commissioner about ProLife, daycare, again, economic development. They're important, and it should be a key tool. I think it's exactly what the city council should be focusing on now.
Wayne, what would you do in South Bend to attract new businesses to the community?
I'd say aside from what these other guys, the other gentlemen have said, they're correct statements of business-friendly environment, streamlining the processes. Aside from that, there's a PR aspect to attracting businesses here. If the top guy that runs that business, the people that are going to come to town and move here, if they like it here when they come here and visit your community, there's a good shot they're going to come here and stay. So you need to actually sell your community to those people, bring them here, invite them here, show them around. Of course, we have some challenges, but I think we have some things that will make up the difference with those challenges. And a lot of people say that the public schools and things like this, I think they'll get that under control. We've got a lot of great private schools that we can sell them on if they have a problem with the public schools. So a lot of it is just getting those top guys to like and want to move to your community.
Ryan, what about that? Is there going to be a PR aspect to this?
I think the city has a market itself, like anybody who's seeking new business.
I think a good example, actually, the city's done a good job with lately is the new South Bend Home campaign. It's really advocated for the Station Park and the Mission Park and trying to attract new businesses there. I think more of that would be great. But I think a longer-term aspect that we haven't talked about as much is really community development. South Bend competes not only with other towns in our region, but with cities around the country, really around the world. It's important to make sure we have a city that people actually want to live in and locate their businesses in. That means having a thriving downtown that people can visit. That means having strong neighborhoods with good public transit and public safety. That's a long-term plan that is critical to our economic development. Having vacant and abandoned houses in every neighborhood and having empty lots downtown doesn't send a good signal to new businesses there, and we need to really put efforts into this.
I talked to code enforcement today about that. Was told somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 vacant and abandoned homes in this community, and of course it shot way up in the last couple of years and what went on. How do you tackle that? And how do you pay for it, more importantly? Because a lot of people say, take care of it. It's the city's responsibility. It's extremely expensive. I think there's a couple ways you can do that. It's thousands of dollars at least to demolish a house. And not every house needs to be demolished. There's a lot of good houses out there that can be rehabbed. Pete moved into a house down the street. It wasn't abandoned, but it was vacant for a while. He's done a great job fixing it up. So demolition is the only answer. But I think, number one, we need to go after absentee landlords who have not been taking care of their properties. There's out-of-town investors who bought up properties at tax sales, and I think they've got liability for not only the expense they cause the city for things like police and fire protection or responding to crimes at their location, but for the impact they're having on property values of their neighborhood. And good ways we can actually find some of those costs. Wayne, what do you think about that? About the abandoned and vacant housing situation?
I think that to start with, I think we need to go neighborhood by neighborhood and identify and classify every block by block, the houses, people that live there, the vacant property, abandoned property. Once you do that, we come up with a strategic plan to address these issues block by block. Which ones are the most important to deal with first? Of course, everybody's going to say mine's more important, but we got to come up with some way to actually come up with how that works. And then after that, once we have a strategy, I actually think that, like say for Habitat, when they go in and try to rebuild into a neighborhood, they put 2 homes up. It's not profitable to build 2 homes together and they hold their value. But if you actually do cluster building, if you can actually get a group of men to go in there, a group of builders that maybe the ultimate building 2 houses, you do 12 or 14 and do like a couple of blocks at a time, then those houses will hold their value. So I think that's an idea worth seeking out, see if we can get some people involved in doing something like that.
Mike, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, and I've heard from other sources, maybe the number might even be higher than now, so which would be really unfortunate. But I think overall we need to be more aggressive. Basically, code enforcement under the current strictures, they're doing about as good as they can do. They're going place to place, they're responding to this house over here and that house over there, and they're tagging these homeowners who don't live here. And what I'd love to see in Indiana, and that's this will be provided the state legislature, is to provide for us here, I know we looked at this before, provide for us here locally what the state of Maryland provides for the city of Baltimore, which has an extensive abandoned housing program, where after these absentee landlords, after they are in such non-compliance, we take over the property. We just take it over. And you fix it or you lose it. And then we can tear it down, we can, if it can be fixed up, greatly fixed up, we land bank those, they need to be torn down, and again, good one, block by block. Block by block strategy, and do that. If we can't do that, at least approach these homeowners and say, look, man, you made a bad investment, we'll take it off your hands. They just turn it over to us. And just do what we can do.
Barrett, do you have anything to add? How do you pay to do that?
Excellent. I think Mike shared some of the views we share some of the views that I shared on Saturday. Baltimore has about 40,000 vacant abandoned homes. Cincinnati has about 30,000 vacant abandoned homes. Around the Kennedy Park, there's about 800 plus abandoned and vacant homes. How we approach that is really, like Mike said and I shared on Saturday, that we look at the best practices from other cities and counties as well. We utilize the legislature to, really one of the big problems are absentee landlords, and use that to give them, the process is you give them a year's time to fix themselves up to code or they lose it. It costs about $3,000 or so to level a home. So we want to look at actually creating more CDCs in our community, maybe address it from the neighborhoods themselves. There's 36 neighborhoods in the city of South Bend. We want to bring back the neighborhood resource center back into the mayor's office. We want to create a sense of pride and collective empowerment of the people so they can deal with the abandoned homes from themselves, from neighbors, as well as utilize the legislature to give us the strength to remove those homes from those landowners. We can spend so much time talking about it. And then as well, we want to create a land bank, as you said before, that you can have these development practices. Look at reshaping how we do home building in this community. Look at perhaps to level our block, which Notre Dame's going to level out 8 buildings in the near future. Create affordable housing, meaning that there can be townhomes that you mix them together, which Baltimore has done, so that people can afford good quality homes that look good, bring up the quality standard of life in that neighborhood, and so we can move forward as a new, bright community there for the individual. Wish we have more time to discuss this. This is too serious an issue for 90 seconds. Sorry.
Pete, you have anything to add?
Well, there is some funding available for the rehabilitation or replacement of vacant abandoned homes, partly through a recent renewal of the federal program, the NSP program, I think it's now called Neighborhood Stabilization Program. The city's demolished over 500 homes in recent years, and yet it all feels like we barely made a dent. And that's because we've got 101,000 people living on a footprint that was built for 132. A lot of what's been said reflects what we've got to do, which has to do with holding absentee landlords accountable. Often, whether the approach is to be aggressive and take it, or whether the approach is to buy them out, the real problem is this. We have a home that's not being looked after. There's an absentee landlord, and they literally walked away. They know that sooner or later it's going to be taken away from them, but they have outsourced all of the procedure, all of the cost, and all of the time it takes to get that house out of their hands, back onto the government's books so that it can either be repaired or torn down and put back on the market. And they've outsourced all that trouble to the city. And you literally can't find them sometimes because there are many ways that you can register a home under what's a more or less fictional company which has the same name as the home, and even worse, often the address of the home. So you literally can't find them sometimes. I think that there needs to be an investigative team stood up within the city, accountable to the mayor, whose job is to use any available resource to simply try to figure out who these people are so that we can either hold them accountable or buy them out.
Did I get everybody? Okay. Just making sure. All right, next question deals with education. That's certainly a hot topic in South Bend right now. As you know, the mayor has no legal authority over South Bend public schools, but it's often held accountable still for what is perceived as sometimes failing schools, low graduation rates, and high dropout rates. So how would you address this issue, and what, if any, influence do you think the mayor can have with the South Bend Community School Corporation? Garrett?
From the discussion we've had thus far for the last 3 months or so, we would approach public education by creating a partnership between the city government and public school systems. We know there are 2 separate entities. One, we will look at doing academic enriching after-school programs, creating public-private partnerships to fund those and looking at the best practices such as the Boys and Girls Club, which are showing reading comprehension growth and also standardized testing and incremental growth as well. Put those in different segments throughout our city, and also we look at I'm part of a group, I've been trying to group that I co-started with another one later in town where we have Saturday academies where we bring in boys from primary to high school age, and we provide them mentoring as well as life skills and academic enrichment programs twice a month on Saturdays. And we show that it's a pilot program. We believe that should be duplicated throughout our city as well. We're also creating public-private partnerships, which we funded now in the shoestring budget to do great work of what we do. And lastly, I want to say that we'll start with a business educational roundtable looking at Montgomery County and Maryland, who has the strongest public school system in America right now. The governor started a task force, business education roundtable, and then moved it from a task force into his own independent nonprofit. We want to mirror something like that in this great city. We bring together business leaders who have a passion and an interest in seeing our education system grow, so people want to invest into our communities. And so we would have that, utilizing business leaders, educational leaders, and parents and teachers at the table together to address the needs of public education. And lastly, the new teacher center, which is something out of San Francisco, which Chicago is looking at, where they've shown from 50% retention rate of the teachers to 90% retention rate of the teachers by providing them mentors and looking at those programs by helping to bring those into our city, which keeps the public school system independent, but the city government in partnership with them.
So you're saying you wouldn't just support those ideas, that would be an initiative on your part as mayor?
It would be an initiative in partnership with the public school system. I think we can no longer allow everyone in the city of South Bend needs to be a participant in either mentoring or helping out a young person, which then has a direct impact on the quality of their education. 41% of African American boys graduate from high school. Out of that, only 32% actually take the core course requirements, so they can actually go into Ivy Tech or another school. And so those are the least of these in our community. So we need to measure our quality of our education based upon how well the least of these do in our public school system. So I know Pete and I have the advantage of going to some excellent universities, and everyone here has, but it really starts with the foundational education in the early years. And so I think it's a responsibility of the mayor to tackle public education and being in support and partner with the established leadership.
Mike, did you take an active role in education for the city?
Yes, as I mentioned, I've been a teacher for 26 years, so it's obviously a passion of mine. I care very deeply. I don't have all the answers. I don't even have most of the answers. I hope I have some of the answers as it relates to our schools here. And I would definitely want to make sure that the superintendent and the school board and teachers and whoever else, parents, kids, let them know that I'll do whatever I can, and whatever resources I can to bear to help them out. I love that this whole community owned problem here or solution. I think is very important. Barrett points out there are wonderful things that are going on in this community to help support the schools. Whether it's people helping little kids learn math, whether it's the programs that are left behind, which helps parents become better parents. You have a lot of things going on in the Robinson Community Center, Learning Center. One of the things that I'd like to support and help to make sure is coordination. The other thing that I will do, and I promise to do, is to go into the schools. You know, I love kids. And if I'm a mayor, I'll be able to teach anymore. And I'll miss that. And I'd like to go into the schools and not just read to the kids, but go teach some government courses or history courses. I got some background in that. And get to know them, get to know the teachers, the parents. I'd like to have an open door policy. You got a problem? You got a question? Talk to me. I want to have the kind of relationship with Mr. Capsa and the board so that I can sit down and have a frank conversation with them all.
Wayne, what specifically would you do when it comes to education?
Well, I'd like to start with say it's the mayor's job to run the city, and the school board and the superintendent's job to run the schools. In an assist capacity, the mayor can do what he can to help the schools. But there is something that I found. It's a very interesting program that I've been following since 1998 and I'm in 2007. But it's actually it was called building assets in your children into assets in our community. And actually, it's on borrowing this from the Bollinger Foundation down in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And actually, this is ran. This program will be modeled after the Allen County Superior Court's Great Kids Make Great Communities initiative. There are 40 basic building blocks or assets that a child has in order to be a well-rounded adult and actually be able to learn. Now, what the study did find was that children with 31 to 40 of these assets, 3% use alcohol, 1% use illegal drugs, 6% engage in violence, 88% maintain good health, 53% succeed in school. If you have less than 10 of these assets in children, 53% are problem alcohol users, 42% use drugs, 61% commit violence, and 25% are healthy, and 7% succeed in school, and 34% value diversity. The thing of it is, this is something that's a community involvement where you have churches, local leaders, and I think the mayor could actually champion a program like this, or it's more of an initiative than a program. It doesn't have to cost money. It's just a way of educating the public and helping build assets in our children and assets in our community. Brian?
I think education is
one of the most important things affecting economic development. Um, we can talk about tax abatement ordinances until we're blue in the face, but I think everybody knows the reason Granger exists is because of the school corporation. That's a long-term strategic disadvantage that we have to overcome. It's not a short couple months in the making. It's happened over generations. But I think there's a lot we can do. The city right now doesn't have any authority in the school board, although we just voted on some legislation that would allow the school board to create a hybrid board and actually have some members appointed. So maybe there will be a role for them there in the future. But we can serve as some leadership. We can bring together, I think, some of the disparate groups that have been fighting together on these issues for a number of years. I think there's great ideas coming from the Chamber of Commerce, great ideas coming from the teachers, from the administrators, and especially from the parents. And one of the proposals I've had is to immediately put in place an education roundtable and bring all those groups together, find a plan and move forward with it. Not only just putting together a plan, but actually trying to leverage some city resources. We've talked about the possibility of using some of the resources we have in TIF districts. TIF money has always been used for economic development, and there's statutes that govern it. But I think there's actually ways we can use some of those resources to work with school corporations, to help some of those schools that need the most help, provide early childhood education, provide full-day kindergarten, or special programming for some of those areas where they don't meet adequate early progress and are putting them into the category of failing schools. A lot of this has to do with money to provide the resources to get the results.
Would you support a partially appointed school board?
I think that's something I'd like to see the city discuss. I think so far the public has generally been in favor of an elected school board, but if the people of the city wanted to have a partially appointed board, I think that's something I'd be open to discussing. Pete?
Well, I'm passionate about education for the simple reason that so many great opportunities have come to me in my life because of education. I know I didn't invent myself. I guess you can see how a mayor with all the problems you've got coming across your desk, from potholes to F5 tornadoes, could be forgiven for almost having a sense of relief that at least schools are not my problem, it's the school board's problem. But of course that's not true. Not only are there some slivers of legal authority that come into play, the school resource officer is of course responsible for keeping the schools safe, report up through the police department to the mayor. The mayor is involved in zoning decisions that can affect schools. The mayor historically has played a role in partly in the before and after school programs. But that informal authority, that moral authority that you have because you speak for the city. Somebody has to be speaking for the city right now saying we cannot allow our schools to be taken over. We cannot allow ourselves to get to the point where we're at the last hour of the loss of local control of some of our schools. That's the kind of leadership and the kind of partnership that I think has to come from the city in order to enable people in the system, the people who are responsible for those decisions, to have the cover they need to do the right thing. So I believe there's a lot that we can do. One other head scratcher. Businesses tell me their biggest need right now has to do with the ability to grow and hire more people. And I think we need to address that because that's inseparable from our schools.
Question number 9 deals with priorities. As mayor, you'll of course have numerous demands on your time, and you have to choose your priorities on which to focus. So in your first 6 months in office, what will be your biggest priorities for South Bend, keeping in mind you each get 90 seconds? And tell us why you believe they are the key areas in which the mayor should focus. And feel free to talk about percentages of how much time, give us a snapshot of your day. What's it look like? Let's begin with Mike.
Basically, I think what I would love to be able to do is, how many days were you talking?
First 6 months.
First 6 months, basically, I think we'd get a big score in some sort of economic development news. That's, all of us can tell you here that that's the thing we hear over and over and over again when we're out talking to people is jobs, jobs, jobs. People are concerned about that. We all have relatives, all of us, and family members, and some of us here, unfortunately, have been unemployed for a long time. I think it's very, it's top close to my mind. And we also have this, that very unfortunate article, we're a dying city, and I think that's shaken the confidence of a lot of people. We have to change that. We have to change that perception. We have to change people's attitudes. We have to give them some hope. And so what I would do is I would focus on some sort of announcement that, you know, we're going to be bringing jobs here, we're moving in the right direction. I think it'll have a huge impact on the psyche of folks, and as well as just their pocketbooks, and then we can move forward. That would be the very first thing I focus on.
Wayne?
Well, I'd say, to start with, I guess we ought to try to clean up our image as far as that goes, as far as economic development and being a friendly city towards businesses. Secondly, the business advisory panel, I want to put together of business leaders. I would like to go through every single economic policy we have in the city of South Bend and get their advice and see what we can do to actually change the things that seem to make us unfriendly. Thirdly, landing a big company that come here, I mean, that might happen, but I think there's some local businesses with a little help might be pushed to grow a little bit. I think the stats I heard that the business is less than 9 employees are where most of the job growth is coming from these days. So I mean, there are some local businesses with a little help that might be able to create a lot more jobs than possibly going for the big fish that we may or may not get.
Okay, so the business advisory panel specifically.
Specifically, we're going to have to go through everything and just basically make a plan, a new plan, a new direction.
Okay, Brian?
I think we've already talked about some of the issues of economic development, getting a streamlined process in place, addressing how we're going to proceed with public education, transparency issues. I think from the day-to-day priorities, though, Mayor, a lot of the job, I believe, is making sure the city runs properly. I mean, there's a lot of basic services, from police and fire protection to making sure the trash gets picked up and the sidewalks and curbs are in good working order. There's people working all across the city every day that need good management. And that's going to be one of the most important parts of the job is having a good management structure in place so that the basics that people come to count on every day are actually being delivered. That takes up, frankly, a lot of time. Beyond that, I'd love to say we could pave the street with gold, but I think realistically, a mayor can't promise that. But what we can promise is that we're going to have input from everybody in the city who wants to be part of bringing South Bend back.
What's that input look like? How do you make sure that happens?
Back to all the issues we've talked about already, making sure that we have to talk to everybody in the community, having everyone involved in the planning process for how we streamline our economic development, or how we actually go back and focus on helping our existing businesses grow. We had a great meeting last night here in the Century Center with business owners from all across South Bend that talked about what's the new entrepreneurial strategy to get business owners involved in city government, and bringing those groups in is important.
Okay. Pete?
Well, there are 4 priorities for action and a 5th for discussion, and I'll see if I can articulate this in 90 seconds. First, and obviously, economic development, and a lot of it does have to do with making sure the agencies are working well. That touches every other area of our success or failure in the city. Second, we talked about schools. Having some action there in the first 6 months is going to be important. Third, public safety, making sure that we have not only the reality but also the perception of public safety, making sure people know that our violent crime rate is plummeting, and at the same time facing the fact that residential burglaries are up, understanding why and doing something about it. And fourth, city services, making sure we have the most transparent, effective, efficient city services possible. The 5th thing, it's not so much a set of action items, but I think it's a theme that will be on my list right away, and certainly in the first 6 months. And that has to do with connectedness. I've become convinced that a city's ability to succeed depends on its connectedness. And that means everything from having a relationship to Mishawaka and Granger that isn't just they're the enemy, to having a better political relationship with Indianapolis, a richer cultural and commercial relationship with Chicago, and perhaps most importantly of all, making sure that the firms, families, and universities here are being used in the right way to build a relationship to the rest of the world. We have got to figure out a way to relate to globalization that is not just being its victim. And I believe we're up to that if we start changing the way we talk about our place in the world.
Eric?
First 6 months actually started with a great transition team. Going in from day one being prepared to meet the challenges head on as a new mayor. So we would create a sense, why we had a down and kind of partially because people lost confidence in our financial situation in the country. So we want to raise the level of expectation and confidence in our community by, we do right now in our campaign, we have together we can too. We'll continue to have open door conversations with our community, hear what the people have to say, and then make practical platform decisions or policies that will address those needs.
So a part of your day is actually going out and
hearing from the people, initiating initiatives that address those issues and concerns with business growth, job growth, and the like, and then hiring those competent staff members to let people know they're hired, their background, their status, and let them know that they're independent thinkers and not connected to the past, but looking forward to the future. And we would do that as well. And so we would just really change the culture of how people view government, being very transparent, being very open, be great listeners, and be active in making initiatives that have measured outcomes and not just ideologies, but things that have substance and theories to support them and best practices we find from around the country and implement them here in the city. And so that's how we would address really the challenge of starting a new government in the first, not only just 180 days, but the first 100 days as mayor. We believe that if you will start your transition from your day one, you're already in 30 days and you're running this city government.
I think we would be revisiting, or do you think that's just the perception? And do you feel safe? Mike?
Yeah, I think in certain sections of the city, crime is definitely a problem. It is true, it's factually true that crime rates overall have gone down in the city. It's indisputable. But there are definitely areas of town where, as soon as the sun goes down, it's very dangerous. People do not feel safe enough. And I think we need to address that area head on. And one of the things that I would like to do, just in terms of public safety, there are just, I think, 3 ideas here. One, invest in some more technology with the South Bend Police Department as it relates to the computer. It was stunning to me that the county was more advanced than the city as it relates to this issue, where because the county police officers, they have access to Wi-Fi. They can access warrants and whatnot. I'd like to see us do that with the South Bend police officers. I'd like to see our police officers engage in better training as it relates to dealing with the public. The whole concept, the old concept of policing, working with the neighbors, getting to know them. Some of the other guys, just trying to have better interpersonal skills with folks, I think is a big deal. And one other thing, I forgot what it was. Right now I think we need to have a more robust game task force. As I understand it, we just have one individual, and we do have a game part of our city. I'd like to see 3 or 4 officers dedicated to do that.
Wayne?
I'd just like to start with by saying that I think the police department and all the fine men and women that work there do a good job. Secondly, no matter what the crime is, you can always reduce it. So I would actually like to borrow a program from Tampa, Florida called Focus on 4. We're actually focused on 4 crimes: burglary, robbery, theft of vehicles, and auto theft. And these things can all be adjusted a bit South Bend. But addressing these crimes aggressively has led to a 56% drop in crime over 7 years. And in actually addressing these small burglary, robbery, and guys who do this stuff, that's got swamped. They get the guy off the street like immediately. I mean, they actually aggressively go after these guys when they're in act. It involves community policing, it involves all kinds of other things. And getting these guys off the street actually helps reduce the violent crime rates too. There's also part of this program that actually, it's sort of a zero tolerance kind of thing with juvenile crime, while addressing say at the end of the school year. The last 2 weeks is an educational thing in the school system where they give the kids, these are all the things you can get involved in over the summer, the swimming pools, the parks, the different programs that are available. At the same time, they're educated that actually, while these things you can do, if you get into trouble, we're going to have zero tolerance, and this is what's going to happen to you. That's drastically reduce their juvenile crime too. So I would like to fashion this and help our city reduce crime.
Ryan, do you think crime is a problem, or do you feel safe?
I feel safe in my neighborhood. I wouldn't raise my family someplace I didn't feel safe. But I know there are people in the city that don't feel safe on the road at a time, and that's a problem. First and foremost, we need to do an extra focus on the areas of our city that are having high crime rates. While overall crime rates have gone down, in some neighborhoods they've gone up. And oftentimes the focused effort is needed to track down and apprehend perpetrators. But I think another important part that sometimes gets overlooked is the community policing aspect. We want to make sure we have, in some neighborhoods, beat officers on the street that actually get to know their neighbors, that they're working in the neighborhood with, that can actually work to address nuisance crimes like graffiti and vandalism. These are things that lead to more and more crime, still broken windows syndrome. And when communities actually take the time to really make a concerted effort to crack down on those areas and make sure that we don't allow for graffiti to pop up all over a 10-block area. And we don't allow for boarded up buildings to become drug houses. If you put in the time, put in the effort, you can make a real difference.
Pete?
Crime citizens safe is the fundamental duty of the government, and it's one of the reasons why $47.5 million, or about 80% of our budget, is the single biggest thing that the city spends its resources on. We have, again, some good news, the 50% drop last year in violent crime, but as long as that number is greater than zero, we've got a problem. And then residential burglaries and other kinds of nuisance crimes are on the rise. And we've got to confront those because we need to have a sense that we're on top of everything, or else it will be more. This also comes back to what we were saying earlier about vacant houses. A vacant house doesn't just have zero value. It has a negative value because the correlation between vacant houses and the emergence of crime is pretty easy to see. Sure.
Well, I agree with the fact that there is crime problem. We have a problem in the majority of crimes. We still have a rise in some burglaries and the like. So how do we address that? Very few ways. I did the 13-week, 4-hour a night program with Citizens Police Academy, where we built a relationship between the police, learned how they operate, and like they would drive crews with the police department. And I think one thing we lack here is a strong relationship between the police department and citizens of this community. So we would have a Citizens Police Review Board so we can mend those broken relationships between the citizens and the police, and then we can have people to go out and inform them of activities that are taking place. Like I said, for the 36 neighborhoods, we want to increase the amount of neighborhood association and groups, so we have neighborhood watches and block captains and the like in our community. And also, not just beat cops around the community, which may be difficult financially to do, but also create a sense of comfort in our downtown community by having some foot patrol here, increase the number of video cameras, which Chicago has done. We have video cameras on Michigan Avenue downtown, but not throughout other communities. So we want to see that in all of our commercial neighborhoods so that people can feel comfortable purchasing and doing commerce in those neighborhoods after 5 o'clock. Those are some of the simple but immediate things that we can do. When people were driving around that day, I remember I talked to some cops, and I was also walking down Western Avenue. I feel comfortable in every neighborhood in South Philly, regardless of the hour, but it's really based upon me being connected to the community and having that dialogue and conversation with those who live in our city. I think we need to raise that level of comfort around just by simply getting to know one another. And so I think the neighborhood groups and associations will raise that pride and that comfort between the police, neighborhoods, and neighbor to neighbor as well.
Okay. Well, we've reached the end of our forum. You'll have some time to present closing remarks to wrap up. In those closing remarks, of course, we'd like to know why the voters should choose you as the next mayor of South Bend. And I'll ask you to refrain from reading any notes or prepared remarks, but just talk off the cuff directly to the people here in the office. Let's see. Wayne, go ahead. Begin.
Well, my name is Wayne Curry, and I'm the Republican candidate, or a Republican candidate for South Bend Mayor. I have been committed to our community for many years, and I still am. South Bend, of course South Bend's not where we want it to be, and we can do better. And I think that I have a lot of knowledge of the neighborhoods and the business community and all the workings of the street smarts of the city. I mean, I know the city pretty well from all my community involvement things, and I really believe I've got a good sense of what we can do to guide the city forward. I just hope that you can come out and vote for me if there's any Republicans in the audience on May 3rd. I don't know how many might be here, but on May 3rd, and it just and help me and join me in building a better tomorrow and in making South Bend a better place to call home. Thank you.
Brian.
Thanks for having us here tonight. It's been great to see so many people show up and come to this event. I think all of us who have been campaigning these last months have been treated with the same display. Everywhere we go, people around the city are optimistic, they're enthusiastic, and hopeful. There's a lot of frustration that we can talk about every day, and that frustration is with us across the country. But the great thing about the next mayor of South Bend is that we're going to have the opportunity to put some changes in place with the whole city behind us. I'm running for mayor not for any political reason. Frankly, I was probably just about done with the legislature anyway. I've got a 2-year-old girl at home and another baby on the way, and it's time for me to be a dad. But when I saw Mayor Lickey up here earlier, I want to say thanks to him for the great job he's done. But when he heard that he was retiring, I decided to
become a candidate for mayor because I wanted to make sure the next 4 years in South Bend were done correctly. My motivation is to see the city turned around and run efficiently and turned into a sustainable, progressive, regional city that has influence over our, not only our neighborhoods, but all of our neighborhoods and helps all of our businesses prosper together. I've got a record, I think, that I'm proud of for doing that over the last 9 years in the legislature, and I would ask for your vote on May 3rd. Thank you.
Well, the main reason that I'm running, and I know this sounds a little funny coming from the youngest candidate, who probably looks like he is, but the main reason is my experience. I think I'm the only candidate who has an economics degree. I'm pretty sure I'm the only candidate who's been part of billion-dollar decisions made by Fortune 500 companies, and the only candidate who's done economic development for a living. And so at a time when economics is at the heart of all the things that our community is facing, I think we need to consider hiring somebody who has a really rich background in that area. One of the things that strikes me tonight is that we all seem to want the same things for the city, and that's very encouraging. That's something I see when I'm out campaigning too, whether I'm knocking on somebody's door and I'm on the front porch, or whether I'm visiting a church, or whether I'm walking around the factory floor. Everywhere I go, you can see that having gone 24 years without an incumbent mayor on the ballot for re-election, we have this unique moment now, this fork in the road, and there's this conversation. I think it's been bottled up in our city, and it can't wait to come out. And it's on people's lips everywhere I am. Again, I think there's a shared sense of where we need to go. But I think that we also need to think about who can provide that kind of original, innovative thinking. Above all, who can provide that spark to ask our community to be everything that we possibly be. And it's in the name of that idea that I would ask for your vote on May 3rd.
Barrett Perry.
Thank you. My name is Barrett Perry, and I want to be your mayor. I want to be the people's mayor. I present myself as one who's well-trained, well-qualified, who's been fine-tuned in the highest levels of government while working in the White House of this great nation, working in the State Department, and being moved from a GS-5 to a GS-14 in just 4 years because of exemplary service to our nation. And then I present myself one who has been economic development to Washington, linking in cities and municipalities throughout this great country, where we grew businesses by providing transportation, sewer, water, and also creating an image for that community, Philadelphia and Baltimore specifically, where they can say that they were a thriving metropolis. And so we've done that. I have a proven record for that. I studied finance at the highest level of public of education, higher learning, as a Reynolds Fellow for Social Entrepreneurship at Harvard University, which means that I was given a scholarship and to pay for my room and board, tuition, and fees and everything, and gave me a stipend to attend one of the greatest universities this world has ever known, at the highest level of public service and the highest level of education. And I present myself as well-trained, well-prepared, with a passion for the people of this great city. Proven through fire, through tough times, through crises, through destruction, through the things you can even imagine how difficult it has been in the State Department, the toughest times the nation has known. So I come back home because I love you. I see my 4-year-old second cousin here, and it brings me the passion and the yearning I have for each and every one of our children's children. So their future can be bright, and no one will be left behind because of the good old boy network. With me, it's a new start, a fresh start, and someone who you can trust that will give their best and work hard for you every day through transparent leadership and change that you can believe in. My name is Barrett Perry. With your assistance, I'll be the next mayor of this great town. Thank you.
Thank you, Barrett. And finally, Mike Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I too would hope that you're considering the choice for mayor that you look at experience and you have a unique set of experiences. First, as a county commissioner, as a county executive, and I think that translates very well to being a mayor. In addition to that, I'm known to be a very collaborative person. I'll work with anybody to get the job done. But even more important than those two things, the mayor has got to be tough. We're going through some difficult times. This is a very tough environment. I've been in county politics, local politics for almost 6 years. And if we're going to make the difficult changes, we're going to need a strong person. And if anyone has worked with me, know that I've never had trouble saying no to people who ask for stuff that they didn't need or we couldn't afford. I have no problem standing up to those folks and doing what's right, even if it costs me politically. Whether it's been my own party, whether it's been my own party chairman, Whether it's been some of the former mayors who don't happen to be in the audience today, always stood up for what I thought was right. That's a key quality of the mayor, especially now going forward. When you bring this city back, make it a great community to live in, with your help, we'll be able to do that on May 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we leave, I just want to thank everyone here for your interest in this process. The voter registration deadline is ending. Before we leave, we have some final comments from Ryan Fenstermaker from the Young Professionals Network. Ryan?
Thank everyone for coming out. I'm the chair of the Young Professionals Network here at the Chamber of Commerce. And I got a lucky job of doing a couple house cleaning issues tonight. First, another hand, thanks to the candidates for coming out and participating. I also want to make sure we mention our sponsors again, Barnes & Thornburg, Martin Supermarket, South Bend Tribune, and WSBT, and Court Furniture. And a round of applause for our sponsors for helping bring all this together. And then one last reminder that you can start voting as early as next week.